Hello and welcome everyone. I am Joy Banks, the Executive Director for the Council of State Archivists, and I'd like to welcome everyone here today and introduce Christy Lear, who is going to be our webinar moderator.
Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us for this year's State Archives Spotlight. Before I get started with the introductions for our presenters, I do want to draw your attention to the chat box. We're going to post a link there to just a quick poll. We really appreciate your feedback. We definitely take that into account when we're looking at planning any future webinars. With that said, I am going to start by introducing Jonathan Pringle from the New Mexico State Archives. Jonathan graduated from the University of British Columbia's Master of Archival Studies program in 2008. He included a First Nations concentration with his degree as he had intended to return to Northern Canada, a region with over 50% Indigenous people after graduation. Instead of returning to the frozen north, he instead took an internship at the Museum of Northern Arizona. This turned into an IMLS grant-funded position for 3 years. In 2011, Jonathan began working for Northern Arizona University's Klein Library, the institution that 6 years previously saw the creation of the protocols for Native American archival materials. He obtained his green card in 2014, then his dual citizenship in 2017. In 2019, his husband started a physician assistant studies degree at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, so he found employment at UNM's Health Sciences Library as their scholarly communications and digital librarian, a position he held from 2019 to 2023. While there, he worked to revive the dormant Native Health database. In 2023, he relocated to Santa Fe to take his current role as Division Director for the State Archives of New Mexico. Welcome, Jonathan. After we hear from Jonathan, we are going to hear from Abby Norderhog from the Wisconsin Historical Society. Abby received her master's in library science from the University of Wisconsin-Madison Library School. Abby began working at the Wisconsin Historical Society in 2008 as the public records accessioner. After a short foray into records management in 2016, she returned to the WHS as the Assistant State Archivist. She became the State Archivist and Director of Acquisitions in 2021, and in 2024, the Deputy Director of Collections and State Archivist. Abby currently serves on the CoSA board, leads Wisconsin's SHREB, and is the Secretary of the Wisconsin Public Records Board. Abby spends her free time driving to assorted kids' sports and activities, crafting, and gardening. Welcome, Abby. With that, I will turn things over to Jonathan.
Great, and I'm just gonna do a screen share so you can see my slides. Here they are. And okay, well, I appreciate being invited to speak on behalf of our agency and the New Mexico State Archives. I've been in this role now for just under 2 years, and I feel like I'm still learning. Having come from an academic environment for pretty much my entire career, working for a state level agency specifically is a little bit of a transition, but I've got some great colleagues here that are helping me along the way. So happy to report out about all the things we're doing here in New Mexico. This is our front entrance when people come to visit us here. It's a very kind of modern looking Art Deco type thing. And we share a building with the State Library, which is upstairs from us. And so we're the lower portion. The State Record Center and Archives, we have a gigantic record center in one end of our building, and the State Archives is in a different part of the building, but we all get to share at least one location for these functions. Our division is the State Archives of New Mexico. Here is our door to our division, and we're working on some exhibits on the right and the left-hand side. We share a space in the building. Our neighbors next door to us are the Cannabis Control Division, which is a really interesting kind of relationship to have in our situation. So we've kind of built a good rapport with them, and we're actually striving towards building and developing a history of cannabis in New Mexico exhibit so that visitors to both agencies that are totally different from one another can kind of learn about the other in some way. So this seems like a fun little endeavor for us to explore. And to the left is our reference room, and that's where visitors come to look at materials, and so we'll get them set up there. And on the right is a recent-ish photo from October of 2023, just to show that we have a lot of fun. And this is about 5 days into my role, so I didn't have a Halloween costume, but they gave me something that I could wear that made me feel like I was part of the thing that was happening. But we have a small and nimble team, and I'll talk a little bit more about our staffing and just who we have here. We have a great group and we have a lot of fun. And this is the inside of our vault. It contains or can hold approximately 44,000 cubic feet of records, and we're pretty much at capacity at the moment. We also have our record center, which houses some of our permanent records on our behalf, because at the moment we're a little full. So they just haven't transitioned from the record center to our space because we have some limitations. We also have a record center, a very large record center down in Albuquerque, about an hour south of us, and we can utilize that space to store records as well. So I'm looking at a major project to remove a few thousand boxes from our current vault here to Albuquerque, and making decisions around that based on who would benefit the most from having those records closer at hand in Albuquerque versus them being in Santa Fe. So that's just one of our next big projects that I'll be working on after we're done with our gigantic migration into archive space, which I can also mention too. We have the old traditional conservation lab, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with the idea of having a dedicated space to traditional conservation techniques and approaches. Unfortunately, years and years have gone by since most institutions have been able to afford to have an in-house conservator. It's actually not very common that you'd have a conservator on hand to do direct interventions of primary sources. So a lot of these types of conservation labs have pivoted and flipped to becoming more like digitization spaces. And so that's what we're using our current conservation lab for. We have a giant overhead scanner just right to the front of you here that doesn't actually work, but it weighs approximately 2 tons. I probably hurt myself trying to move it. We also have a wide image scanner and a big printer and a book scanner, and we can do flatbed image scanning, and we can do some document scanning as well. So we use this space kind of flexibly to use for our digitization purposes, and that seems to be working pretty well. We also use this for exhibit prep and mounting. We've got a dry mount press, and we've got foam core. We've got all the things that are required to launch a professional looking exhibit. Organizationally, well, this is our organizational chart. We are part of the Commission of Public Records, and the Commission of Public Records is not part of the executive branch of the government. It's an independent agency. It was established in statute in 1959. And the commission is comprised of members that represent various government agencies and departments across the state government. So we have the Secretary of Cultural Affairs, who's one of our commissioners, and a variety of other folks that comprise this commission. And then there's a chair of that commission, and they meet quarterly. So I go to all of the commission meetings just to kind of keep them apprised as to what we're doing at state archives. And then kind of running the whole show at the building level is our state records administrator, who is appointed by the Commission of Public Records. So he serves at the whim or the duty of the commission. And under him, he has a deputy state records administrator. And then there are 6 unique divisions within the agency itself. We have our information technology, administration, administrative law, which are the folks that deal with rules changes, and publishing the new register for changes to those rules. We have our records management division. We have our Office of the State Historian, and we have archives, which is me. And so overall, we have a mission to serve, protect, and facilitate access to historical and public records. And altogether, our entire agency is approximately 29 or 30 people. And so drilling down a little bit, we have the State Archives of New Mexico itself. So there's myself, the division director. We have a bureau chief, Elena Perez Lizano, and our archive secretary, Margarita Romero, who those two report directly to me. And Dina Hunt and Sean Dickerson are our two archivists who report to Elena. So we have 3 or 4 professional archivists that serve that role. And having only 5 people in our division is pretty small. We used to have 9 people at our height. And so it's a little limited, but we definitely make do, and we're very nimble with what we can provide and how we provide access to our patrons. Because of our limited staffing, we are open by research appointment only. So we encourage people to email us, and we'll schedule them Tuesdays through Thursdays, 10 to 1. And if it's something that they've shown up and they're just like, oh my gosh, I drove 2 hours, we'll often make that work no matter when they show up. We try to be a little bit more welcoming and open and understanding of those situations. We also accept quite a few emails or take emails that are reference requests that we serve remotely. We'll digitize things and send them to people. We've seen a big uptick in those and a bit of a drop in our on-site visitors. I think because we're so nimble and effective with our remote services. And these are the types of records that we have. So we, of course, have government records from the early 1600s to present. As you know, New Mexico began as a Spanish province. And so in the late 1500s up to 1820 or so, we were under the government of Spain. And then for 20 years, we became part of the Mexican Empire, as it were. And then the Americans came in 1846 and now became a territory at that point. In 1912, we have statehood. So for that reason, our county records from all the various counties go to 1912, which is statehood. And then after that period, the counties individually manage them. We have public records as well as private manuscripts that are from non-governmental entities. We have a large film and video collection. And as I've learned, that is quite synonymous with working in a state archives, our genealogical materials are quite extensive so that we can help our patrons with their family trees. And we'll have access to Catholic Church records, census records, and published family histories that help with that. And a wide variety of private papers that complement the public records that we have here, but they all typically pertain to the Southwest or New Mexico specifically. Some of the highlights of our collections include the land grant files. So a lot of these are represented in the quite popular Spanish Archives of New Mexico. Some of you might not know, but we are a NARA affiliate. So we house records that actually are the property of the National Archives and Records Administration here in New Mexico, so that they're closer to the population that would most benefit from having access to them. So these particular records are from 1685 to 1912. And they're assembled by the Surveyor General and the Court of Private Land Claims. And this would be after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which was in 1848, and that saw the annexation of Mexican territory to the United States. To support some of the land grant records, you can imagine that it's been quite a legal battle for a lot of folks. And so a lot of our researchers that come to us are looking to claim or to determine their status of their claim to a particular area of land. And so a lot of times that goes to litigation and becomes a court file, court record. And so we have a lot of those district court records that can support land grant research. We have private collections that are maybe those of attorneys like A.A. Jones, he was an attorney and a politician who represented lots of clients who were involved in land grant litigation. So sometimes researchers find really helpful information in those files, and lots of others. The land grant questions probably comprise 30% of our total research requests. And of course, kind of alongside with those are the official court records. In the Spanish Archives of New Mexico, we'll also have the civil records from the early period. So our earliest record that we have here is from 1620, and the Mexican period from 1821 to 1848. And of course, classically, the criminal and civil court records from all the New Mexico counties up to 1912. And court records come to us 10 years after their file closed or the close date, according to Records Management 1.21.2.615. So we have those here, and we make those available when patrons make requests for them as well. And because people often ask me, and I think all of you are familiar with being asked, what's your favorite thing in your collection? And so I apologize if you've heard me talk about this document before, but I just love it because it's such an important integral document to New Mexico history. If those of you who aren't familiar with New Mexico history, you might be interested in learning that the Spanish were here in 1598, but about 8 decades later, the Pueblo population, basically the indigenous population comprising of several different communities, and they're called Pueblos here, they banded together in a very formal strategy to remove the Spanish from New Mexico. And so they had a very clever way to do that and to kind of inform everyone on this day, we're going to do this big uprising. And this document that you're looking at here was written on August 9th, 1680. And this document was 2 days before the actual beginning of what's now known as the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, that forcibly and violently removed the Spanish from the area for 12 years. And so this is recorded by the governor of New Mexico at the time and reporting in a journal effectively to the King of Spain about this uprising. And there's been several translations done of this document, and they're all very interesting to read. The verbiage and the way that they refer to the local population, there was definitely a lot of the interest in converting the savage and the heathen and all of that in these documents. So you can see that it just wasn't a really good relationship. And so the Pueblo Revolt really, when the Spanish came back, they had to forge new relationships with that same population that had ejected them earlier. And so we sometimes think of the Pueblo Revolt as being a necessary action to kind of get at the issues about working together and living together and having lots of different kind of cultural perspectives and religion and history and food. And so how do we coexist in one space? And so we kind of had to learn some things through a difficult time. But it's, again, one of my favorite documents. And so I love to show that whenever I can. We'll have governor's papers. So this is our first governor, this pictured over here. So we have the governors who were part of the Spanish crown from 1598 to 1822 in our Spanish archives in New Mexico. We have the governors who were part of the Republic of Mexico from 22 to 46. And we'll have that brief period when we were under US military occupation in the territorial archives of New Mexico. And then, of course, our territorial government in general from 1851 to 1912. And governor's records are considered permanent. And so we receive those at the end of their tenure. So we'll have all of the governor's papers. And so we'll receive the 8 years of Governor Lujan Grisham next year at some point. And some of our private collections, this was the one that I worked on when I first came, was David's studio. It was a local portrait photographer who practiced from 46 to 1992. And he took portraits and pictures of many, many important people and political figures during this time. So not only is it a really strong genealogical resource, there's easily over 30,000 images in this collection of individuals, families, and so it's been a really important treasure trove for us here. Uh, we'll have the Bradford Prince papers. He's a non-governor, and so sometimes when people donate records to us, it's like, well, they were a governor, but they also donated this other group of materials. And so we have two different collections for Bradford Prince. We have him as our governor, and then we have his private papers as well. And this represents his time as a chief justice or a lawyer and the head of the Historical Society here in New Mexico. And of course, everyone's familiar with copy collections or research collections that are just artificial assemblages of like newspaper clippings or other pamphlets or ephemeral materials. The Donald Klein collection, he was an avid researcher on outlaws in New Mexico, particularly the Lincoln County War. And if you can see who here is on the right, I'm sure Lisa, who's in the room, understands this image almost immediately, and maybe all of you do too. That is Billy the Kid. And Billy the Kid questions comprise, who knows, maybe 10% of our researchers who come to us, or the voicemails from people with conspiracy theories about Billy the Kid that we have to entertain. We get lots of inquiries about Billy the Kid. So one of the largest projects that we've just recently completed is we migrated our entire catalog from what we called Heritage, which was based in WebGenX trying to recall the actual name of the software, Lucidia. No, that's something different. No, actually, no, it's Lucidia and one of their software products. We've been in that product for about 25 years. And we in New Mexico have a consortium known as New Mexico Archives Online. And we were the one entity or one institution that wasn't part of this consortium. And so a year or two ago, it had been decided that we were going to plan a long-term project to migrate all of our finding guides from this not homegrown, but this proprietary system, this database, and move that all into archive space. So I have familiarity with archive space in some of my previous positions. So I helped do the metadata mapping and worked closely with the team at the University of New Mexico and their IT group to ensure as smooth as possible transition from a system that had been used in lots of different ways for 25 years. You can imagine, I'm sure all of you can relate to inconsistent metadata and people just doing the best they could, but still like trying to figure out, should I try to clean this up before migration or post migration? So now we're in the post migration phase where we're just cleaning up some things. And fortunately, we have some great colleagues at UNM who are willing to help us with some of the things that they can run queries on and just fix in bulk. So we're excited about some of that. We think this is a really good move to be in New Mexico Archives Online. It just really greatly assists with the patrons here in New Mexico. And also it's emblematic of the fact that New Mexico is a very collaborative state. We, as archivists, know all the other archivists in the other institutions. We're all very close. We have a listserv. We have a group that we all get together and talk and work out some things that were going on. I also like to think that we don't operate in a spirit of competition. We're very much of the mindset that we would rather find an institution that's better suited to house the materials that most benefit the researchers than anything else. So I think we're very much in that mindset here in New Mexico. We also have our digital content on New Mexico Digital Collections. When we left our former database, it was a full content management system. So it enabled embedded direct digital content associated with any record. So we had to extract all of that metadata and upload all of those images and the associated metadata into a content DM instance that we now know as New Mexico Digital Collections. So we're going to be doing a lot more population of digital content here. One of our largest collections that we've contributed to is the New Mexico Department of Tourism records, which is on their featured page, which is great. Of course, other resources that you're probably all familiar with, we actively use Ancestry and Family Search and the newspaper archive. These are integral resources, particularly with our genealogy inquiries that we receive. And that's what I have for you. That's my brief introduction to our state archives of New Mexico. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, thank you for being here and for hearing about us. And if you ever need to reach out, this is my contact information, and this is our address here in Santa Fe.
Hey, hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the Wisconsin State Archives. And now my screen share is complete. Sorry, I had to click that a couple times to get that to work. My name is Abby Norderhow. I'm the state archivist at the Wisconsin Historical Society. And like my introduction said, I've been here for 17 years and I've had a variety of different. I'm excited to talk about the state archives. So to kick it off and give you a little history, you can see our building here on the left. That's from about 1912. And on the right, you can see what our building looks like today. You can see quite a bit of scaffolding on the north side of the building. We are, at this point, have been around for about 125 years in this building. And we have been in a kind of a continual cycle of upgrading and construction projects to keep our building going. So right now we are getting some masonry work repaired, and that project will take about a construction. So the Wisconsin Historical Society itself was founded in 1846, which actually predates Wisconsin statehood by 2 years. And the goal at our time of creation was to collect from the pioneers then alive such facts in regard to the early history of Wisconsin as they might possess as well as to treasure up those occurring in the future. So we had lofty goals from the get-go, and our initial director was an avid collector who spent his time writing to his friends on the East Coast and his friends throughout the US at that time, and basically collecting anything they would send him. So we have a tremendous early collection, and we have tried to continue making really smart collection choices. In 1854, we became the first state historical society in the country to receive government funding. But our path to becoming a state archive took a little bit long. Our first suggestion that the Wisconsin Historical Society should become the state archive was in 1872, but no action was taken on that decision, on that recommendation. In 1904, the National Archives surveyed the state's records and suggested that the Wisconsin state government create a Department of Archives. But the state declined to create a department because they already had the Wisconsin Historical Society and determined that it could fill that role. But we still weren't named a state archive. In 1907, the first public records law was passed, which authorized any record more than 5 years old to come to the Historical Society with no provision for record destruction. So we were able to collect public records, but in 1920 we ran out of space, so we had to stop collecting space. Running out of space will be a theme throughout my talk today, and others can probably relate to that. In 1936, we started collecting public records again, and then in 1943 we ran out of space, so we stopped. And then in 1947, Governor Walker then called for the creation of the state archive, and passed the Thompson Public Records Act, which established a 3-person committee on public records comprised of the Attorney General, the state auditor, and the head of the Wisconsin Historical. In the mid-1950s, the idea to consolidate records management under the Historical Society was floated. That did not pass. And then in 1955, the state archive was briefly transferred to the Department of Administration, but it came back to the Historical Society by the early. So fast forwarding from the early 60s through many happy years of collecting and processing and cataloging and growing a backlog unchecked, we were able to continue our program until our next milestone, which was 1995. From 1995 to 2000, we had what we called the Public Records Project, which was designed to work on the 40,000 cubic feet of backlog that we acquired starting when we were happily collecting in the 1960s. That project led to the deaccessioning of 12,000 cubic feet of records and the creation of finding aids and online catalog records for 4,300 cubic feet of records. During state budget reductions in the year 2000, or the year 2002, we actually lost our state archive staff, and our state archives remained unstaffed until 2008 when we hired an electronic records archivist, a public records accessioner, which is me, and we kind of reinvigorated the state archives. Today, we have a public records accessioner, a state records archivist, and a vacant electronic records position. I'm hoping that we'll be able to fill that position. We were able to revitalize the program in 2008 because the state began assessing state agencies to pay for the state. We continue assessing state agencies to pay for our program till today. Agencies are assessed a dollar amount based on the number of records schedules that they have and then the number of staff within the agency. So that money pays for 3 FTEs, it pays for our preserver prescription, and it pays for research. So the Wisconsin Historical Society has 5 divisions, of which the collections division is. The mission of the organization is to collect, preserve, and share. The state archives falls within the collections division, and the state archivist is the division's deputy director. Because of our organization, we have a number of staff who work with state and local government records, but they are not situated within the state archives, and they're not necessarily counted among state archive staff. We just count them among. So the state archives is located within the acquisitions and government information section. The goal of that section was to bring together staff that bring in material and quickly make it available to do more product, less costly. This section also includes manuscript acquisitions, library, and library. Our division or our section of collections, care, and access manages preservation, object loans, and movement of collection items to the state. It also includes museum registration. And then this section is currently training a small group of staff to do in-house conservation. Like Jonathan mentioned, we no longer have a full-time in-person book and paper conservator. So we are trying out the idea of bringing together a cohort of staff, getting them some professional development, and then relying on folks to do composition work. This idea was conceptualized in the winter, and we are kicking it off in earnest this month. So more details will be available in the future on how kind of training up the in-house cohort is going to work. Our collections information and management section manages the cataloging, EAD creation and production, and all metadata creation for digital collection. Our public history section does museum curatorial work, including object acquisition, and public services provides reference service for our library and our. In total for our holdings, we have about 45,000 cubic feet of state records, 22,000 cubic feet of local records, and about 12 terabytes of state and local records. In addition to public records, we also cover a manuscript collection, which is about 40,000 cubic feet of. One thing you might notice from our division organization is that we don't have a digital services section or digitization area within the collections division. In spring of 2025, digitization was moved from the collections division into our division of business services with the idea that digitization serves our agency as a whole, not just the collections division. We are working through the transition of that and trying to specifically work through how to have collections handled with archival care when we are there being used by division of design. So again, that transition is pretty new and we're still working it through. It's been incredibly successful so far. We are just trying to specifically work on the metadata point of creation and how a group in one division goes from another division. Things like that. We operate 3 buildings in Madison, Wisconsin. The headquarters building, which I showed on that first slide, is our original facility. It opened in 1900. So in the upper left on the slide, you see our library reading room. Our library is multifaceted. We're the North American History Library, UW Madison, and we receive a large portion of our acquisition budget to support graduate level research for universities. We also collect local history, genealogy publications, Wisconsin and national serials, and many other things. This is showing the reading room. There are 12 levels of library stacks that are not featured. The bottom left is our archives reading room. It's open Monday through Saturday from 8 until 5 during the week and 9 until 4 on the week. This room was given a refresh in 2024 with new electrical, carpet, and furniture. You can now use your laptop and plug it in at to table, which is one of the things we heard a lot from folks coming in. We need more. And then on the right are archive stacks. We have 4 floors of stacks in our headquarters building, and then 2 former museum galleries that were converted into stacks in our museum out of our headquarters. The second building we operate in Madison is the State Archives Preservation Facility. We also call this building SAFE. This building was a result of 24 years of planning and advocacy. Over the course of this planning, we went through 3 different locations, several different architects and planners, and 1 major site. Planning really started in earnest around 2006, and the building opened in 2018. It's a state-of-the-art space designed to care for Wisconsin's historical artifacts and archives, and it's owned by the Department of Administration with the Wisconsin Historical Society, the Wisconsin Veterans Museum, the Wisconsin Center for Film and Theater Research, the state capitol, and the executive residence all use storage space within it. The building is 188,000 square feet and holds approximately half of the library and archives collections, with a heavy focus on public art. We moved the entirety of the WHS's object and archives collections. We page from this building once a day, so researchers can come to our headquarters reading room and use our catalog to place a request for materials stored in this building, and we drive it over to headquarters once a day around noon or 1 o'clock. We are really lucky in that this building is about 3 miles from our headquarters. One of the locations we're looking at is in a city outside of Madison, so that gives us the ability to get things over to our users pretty quickly. This building houses archives as well as, and all of those things can get to HQ with 1 day. And then our third building is what you see on the upper left. So it's currently a vacant spot, but it will be the new Wisconsin History Center. It is situated across from the state capitol, and on the bottom right of this slide, you can see its architecture. Much like the SAFE building, this has been a project 20 plus years in the making, and it is slated to open in 2027 with 3 permanent galleries, 1 changing gallery, and 1 community. As you can imagine, creating this history center and preparing to open this history center has been a major focus for staff throughout our agency for the last, really in earnest, the last 4 or 5 years. We have had teams developing storylines, going through the archives and looking for collection items to scan and put on display, and really thinking through the kinds of stories and collaborative materials that we want to have in this history center. Then I wanted to highlight the Area Research Center network. It's one of the most innovative archives practices that the state of Wisconsin has. In 1949 and 1951, legislation was passed to allow for the creation of depositories outside of the WHS headquarters, specifying that records should be kept in proximity to the area that they were. This was done for 2 reasons. It was done to better serve Wisconsin citizens and to, once again, alleviate space constraints. So the idea behind the Area Research Centers is that they operate in partnership with the Wisconsin Historical Society, and it's a partnership with the University of Wisconsin. So we have 4-year state campuses at the locations that are starred on the map. And at those locations, we have archives reading rooms that store both Wisconsin Historical Society owned records, as well as records that those archives are collecting to document the community. So folks can go to any of those archives and request material be transferred either from the WHS headquarters in Madison to one of those locations or between those areas. And then those materials have to be used in that Area Research Center and sent back to their archives of origin. So we find that this is incredibly useful both for college students who are doing research papers and for National History Day students. We have a few ARCs that have really invested in the National History Day program and are able to request primary sources for those students to come in and use, so that we're not expecting people to drive down to Madison just to have access to it. Our local records program makes a point when we collect records, they come down to Madison, they get processed, and then they get sent to the Area Research Center that is closest to where those records were created. So this way, the state can fulfill its records management mandate, but keep records in proximity to the people home. So these records are then discoverable in our catalog. Our catalog is maintained in cooperation with the University of Wisconsin and holds both our books and our archival materials. So they are discoverable. You request them through that catalog, and we have staff in Madison who coordinate the shipping of materials. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on some of the public records roles in Wisconsin. So records management is split between the Department of Administration, the Wisconsin Historical Society, and state agencies. Each agency is required to appoint a records custodian, and then for most state agencies, the custodian delegates another staff member to function as the agency's custodian. These record officers write schedules for approval by the Wisconsin Public Records Board, which is staffed by the Department of Administration, with members appointed by the and the state archivist sits on that board as the designation of the director of the Wisconsin Historical Society. The Public Records Board can authorize committees to draft record schedules for approval, but the board itself does not do any of that. The Department of Administration runs the State Record Center and then manages annual disposition of boxes with agency approval. Those records are then coordinated with our public records archivist to transfer to the Historical Society. That transfer happens in August and January, and we usually in January get about 800 cubic feet of records. And fortunately, the summer shipment is smaller. This August, we're looking at getting about 125. So, much happier with the August shipment than the one. So the Department of Administration also staffs the Public Records Board, and then has a position called the Enterprise Records Officer, which works on records management topics across state agencies. At various times, state archive staff have assisted in those efforts, particularly surrounding electronic. And then our staff was created in 1977 by an executive order to assist state, local, and private endeavors in the preservation of historical. I listed on the screen here some of our current projects. We are currently working on a landscape survey. The Wisconsin Historical Records Advisory Board had not kind of taken the temperature of collecting institutions in Wisconsin in a number of years. And during our last strategic planning session, the board members and folks at strategic planning thought that it was really critical that we get a good handle on who is collecting in the state and what they are collecting. So we have been surveying and we're still collecting responses while at the same time working on analyzing that data and putting it into a map so that people and institutions can find one another. We offer 3 Governor's Archives Awards every year. So those awards are issued jointly by the RAD and the state of Wisconsin governor, and they recognize various facets of archival work. The RAD offers 6 professional development scholarships every year to attend SAA, Math, the Wisconsin Local History and Preservation. And then the Wisconsin Historical Preservation Conference has speakers, and the RAB every year works to identify at least 2 archival sessions so that the local historical societies can benefit from professional development. Thank you.
Thank you again to Abby and Jonathan. Before we get to the Q&A portion, we do have just one more quick little poll for you guys. Again, we really appreciate any feedback that you give us. The working group definitely takes a look at all this when we are planning for future webinars. There should be another poll popping up. All right, so I'm gonna go through and look at the chat. I think a couple of questions popped up. Definitely feel free to raise your hand and we can unmute you and you can ask your question. You're also welcome to put them in the chat and I can read them. Joy had a question. She said, love the Wisconsin Area Research Center Network. Sounds like ILL for archives is a joint program. Where is the funding for this coming from? Is there ever a charge for users?
It is very much like ILL for archives. There is no charge for users, and the Wisconsin Historical Society provides the funding. We are able to partner with the Madison Public Library's Red Box service, and it's how they move material around to their member libraries. So they help with the transport to some of the closer area research centers, and then we work out less frequent transfers to those that are further away, but still fairly often. And it's, I should say, it's staffed by just one part-time person who manages the request.
For Jonathan, considering that your agency is independent of the state's executive branch, what are the benefits or downsides experienced?
Well, I'm relatively new to this, so I love hearing from my other state colleagues who are located within secretaries of state, et cetera, part of the executive branch, and some of the stressors that they experience from that. I think one of the benefits that we have is that we have a lot more autonomy as to what we can do. One example is even in areas around retention or hiring. The executive branch has a more formal return to work, no telework options available to those other agencies that are part of the executive branch. But for example, we can, a way to kind of lure people to work with us and to stick around is that we have remote work options up to three days a week. And that makes a big difference for retention and keeping people happy. So that's just one example, but just more autonomy, especially when we're dealing with so many different different state agencies. I think it's really beneficial, particularly with the records management unit and function, to remain at arm's length from some of those other agencies. The downside that I've noticed very tentatively is that sometimes we can get lost in the shuffle, is that someone's not really thinking about us. And we lean on our commission to create that advocacy for our agency. And sometimes we may feel that our commission could be doing more, or like we're not giving them the correct information in order for them to advocate for those things that we need. So it's difficult to sort of create that awareness and advocacy and excitement from our commission when they're already the heads of their own agencies and they're busy doing that. So it's that's probably one of our bigger vulnerabilities.
Okay, this one is for Abby. Assuming the current priority is the new History Center, what are some of the challenges of running and maintaining the state archives alongside that project? And what are the state archives priorities once the History Center has opened?
So the biggest challenge of running the state archives in the midst of a project like this on the History Center is keeping the eye on the fact that the state archives is statutorily mandated and has specific requirements and actions that we need to take. We have had to reallocate a lot of staff working on the History Center, which is makes a lot of sense. It's a really exciting project, and it's the best way to highlight a lot of our collections. But the records management processes, the state archives processes don't. So sort of continuing to advocate for the fact that those folks need to continue working on state archives records and this transition working while history center. Once the History Center is open, we are going to prioritize a couple. I think the biggest thing that as an institution we're going to prioritize is civic education and history literacy. So we are really going to start working on connecting our collections to classrooms, which I think has a really interesting opportunity for the state archives, particularly a lot of our collections that really highlight individual citizens and show people how they can connect to the archives. So we're going to focus on civic literacy, and then our other focus is going to be rewriting our collection development plans for materials. And one of my goals is to make sure that we develop manuscript plans that complement what the state archives do, so that we're able to tell stories from the state side of things and also then the people that are involved in it.
And I have another question for Jonathan. It sounds like a big vulnerability right now is a lack of space to grow and smaller staffing than previously. What sort of measures are you considering as you think about the short and long term?
Well, great. I'm sure all of us can relate to this particular question, but I alluded to it a little bit before. We do have our record center who have been wonderful collaborators and colleagues to house our permanent collections on our behalf until we get it sorted out. It was about 10 years ago, I understand, that our building was slated to have a major addition put onto it. So the plans were struck, but funding fell through, and so that didn't happen. And so you kind of have to pivot when those things happen. We have our Albuquerque Record Center, and they've been very gracious in offering space that they have available to us for some of our records that would be better suited for access by patrons down in Albuquerque. So I think that's a shorter term solution that we're looking at. We're also I'm looking creatively at other areas in the building too. Maybe there's another space that we can take advantage of that's connected to our building that we just haven't thought of creatively. So I look for all sorts of opportunities where I can. And staffing, yeah, of course, it's difficult in a very small agency like ours. Sometimes it's almost things change on a dime, it seems. So it could be that we just need to be ready with a position in mind that is appealing, that we've made the case for to our state records administrator and other official folks that make those decisions around when we might have budget to fill a line. So I'm always thinking about what could we use next, and sort of like making sure I don't get too much. I'm not asking for too much, but I'm being very specific and fairly focused on that ask, so that when the opportunity comes to staff that line, that I can fill it with what it is that we need at the moment. So kind of classic management strategies with advocating for your group and for what you actually need, instead of just asking for lines but not really describing what they're used for. So that's my approach at this point.
All right, and I have another question for Jonathan. Are there any restrictions on your church records?
Well, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that because we house copies of records from some of the churches here in New Mexico, one of the largest being the Archdiocese of Santa Fe. So they've graciously offered an access copy of their resources for researching their collections. And I know that the University of New Mexico is involved in a large project now with the Archdiocese related to school records. And so there's some really interesting projects coming out of that. But fortunately, the types of things that we have in our collections don't hit quote unquote on some of the more problematic aspects of the history that might be connected to the church.
All right. Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat, and I don't see anybody's hands raised. Again, I just want to thank Abby and Jonathan for taking the time to be here today and share all of this amazing information about their organizations. And that I'm going to turn things back over to Joy.
Thanks, Christy and Abby and Jonathan and everyone who was able to join us today. I wanted to come on and give some reminders about some other additional CoSA offerings that you might be interested in. Coming up this Tuesday, we will have our first shop talk of the year with Ancestry, and they will be doing a special focus on their Ancestry classroom. So for those of you who may offer services to K-12, have education programs, or may be interested in adding that to your repertoire, I hope that you will register and come. And then later in August, we will be finishing up this series that we've been doing with CoSA and Siri on the impact of AI and transferring Teams and Outlook. So if you've not registered for that, we hope that you will join us. Additionally, we have some other CoSA activities, including our Archivists Who Code group that will be meeting on August 5th, our annual CoSA business meeting, which is open to everybody who might be curious about how CoSA is doing, on August 7th. Our next Chatting with Colleagues will be happening on August 13th, and then our ever popular Preservica user group is on August 18th. I wanted to drop a reminder in here that our early bird registration deadline is coming up on Monday, July 28th, for any of you who may be interested in joining us for our CoSA annual meeting in Salt Lake City in September. And then, as always, we could not do any of this without the generous support of our sponsors. So a special thanks to our Siri program sponsor, Preservica, our corporate partners, Ancestry, Apex, and Family Search, and our corporate sustainers, Page Freezer, Conserve, Atlas, and SMA. You can always find CoSA in most of your favorite places, I think. So visit our website, join us on Facebook. And as always, we will be posting our recording of this and all of our educational content to our YouTube channel. So thank you all for coming, and we wish that you have a fantastic rest of your day.